Welcome to Riding the Emotional Rollercoaster, Parenting Youth with ADHD and Anxiety. This session is brought to you by the Learning Resource Center Network. The Learning Resource Center Network provides educators, leaders, and families of students with disabilities to support, services, and professional development. Interested in all that the LRC has to offer? Check out one of our locations and email the contacts listed on the slide. This session is brought to you by the LRC-South, located within Rowan University's College of Education. So today, we're going to situate this video within our series. We're going to do a little check-in. We're going to give a brief overview to ADHD and anxiety. We're going to talk about some strategies for parents and coping skills for youth.
And so as we get started, just so we're clear, our goal is to really talk about the connection between ADHD and anxiety and really talk about some specific techniques parents can use to help your children as we move forward. And so before we get started, I would really like to introduce who we are, who are taking on this journey with you, our own emotional roller coasters. My name is Kara Ieva. I come to you with many identities. First and foremost, I am an imperfect parent, so I would like to share that. I own that. I'm a learning curve as a parent. I am also a professor in the Counseling and Ed Settings program. I'm a former teacher, administrator, and school counselor. And I am a mom of neurodiverse children diagnosed with ADHD, autism, and anxiety.
My name is Cathy Brant. I'm an assistant professor of equity at teacher education here at Rowan, former teacher, also a very imperfect parent to two lovely little boys, one of which has ADHD and anxiety.
Mm-hmm. And part of our coming together to offer you this series is to really share a level of our backgrounds and also our experiences in navigating this. And so it is difficult for us as parents and also educators, and we thought we might be able to share some of the information we've learned along the way with you. Before we get started, we are adults. We are also humans, and a lot of times we put other people's needs ahead of us, including our own children. And so this is just a moment for you to check in with you and how you're feeling, what's going on for you, both physically and or emotionally. And if I were looking at this battery today, I would actually say I have moved from feeling okay to probably feeling good today. In this moment within this hour. How about you, Cathy?
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling good. I've had a couple of things kind of been lifted off of my mental weight, and I'm feeling good. So I'm also just considering how can I maintain that and keep feeling good.
Yeah. And as we move through to start to talk about our own children and your children as well, it's just important to remember, don't forget us. We are adults. We can't support if we are not fully charged ourselves. With that being said, we're going to briefly go over just some of the signs and symptoms of both ADHD and anxiety, and then we'll talk about the intersect of them. And so I want to be very clear that these are just some signs. It doesn't mean that they are diagnoses and also you diagnosing your own children. And so with that being said, we'll talk about some of the signs. So difficulty focusing or staying on task or follow through is one. Problems keeping track of materials and organization. Also trouble following through with complex projects. So giving a multi-step direction is something extremely hard to follow through with. A lot of distractibility and forgetfulness in the sense of you assume they're listening and they may not be because they are distracted even though they're making eye contact. Appearing not to listen when spoken to. I'm gonna come back and tell you a story about that. Increased need to be up and moving. I would say that increased need does not necessarily have to be present to have ADHD, but it is a symptom. As is being very fidgety with both hands and body, and impulsive. And I do want to talk about impulsive being both a physical thing and also an emotional thing. Physical in the sense of their body, not necessarily having full control, quick to hit, quick to touch, but also emotionally quick to spew out something that they that could be hurtful in a sense, but they can't stop themselves from sharing that information. Which also leads to a tendency to interrupt other people. They are so busy in their head that they want to get it out and they'll forget it. And so they tend to come across as rude and interrupting, and a lot of excessive talking. And when Cathy and I think about our kids, I think about the repetitiveness of my child not listening to me, in a sense of, I assume because his attention was on me that he was listening, and I get halfway through to ask a question and then he says what, and he never processed what was happening in the first place, and then I have to repeat it. So I would say it's a huge cycle. Cathy, what about you? I think there's one of these that really speak to you as well.
Well, I think mine is an excessive talker, um, which also is that same idea of like that if he has something to tell you, he is going to tell you no matter what. And so it's always something.
Mm-hmm. And so we're going to move from signs of ADHD to signs of anxiety, and then we'll talk about how they blend together. And so thinking about signs of generalized anxiety, and there are multiple different diagnoses of anxiety that fall under this umbrella. So this is very generic in a sense, but restlessness or feeling keyed up or on edge, so they feel like they need to be doing something and moving all the time, or very easily fatigued. It takes a lot, right, to emotionally be on. And so we get really tired. Difficulty concentrating or mind going blank, which is a crossover, as you just heard from us, from ADHD. Irritability, both in a physical and emotional sense. Anxiety takes its toll on the entire body by the amount of mental energy. And so similar to us, when we're not getting good sleep, we tend to be irritable. This is very much in that same line and concept. Muscle tension. A lot of people with anxiety tend to tense up any forms of muscles. It could vary. A lot of times we hear in adults get diagnosed with TMJ, where they tense up the jaw, right? Which sometimes comes along with stress and anxiety. And then sleep disturbance. I can tell you hands down, for me, myself, that I know when I'm not doing well based on how my sleep is. And while it's extremely important, it also is interrupted a lot neurologically as far as anxiety is concerned. And I do want to draw your attention to the visual that's on this slide, because we as parents, and I am guilty of this, as dismissing sometimes the physical symptoms that are aligned to what's happening internally, frequent trips to the bathroom, upset stomach, headaches. And I said, I am the person, you have a headache, here's some Tylenol, go to school. Here's some Pepto-Bismol, go to school. But when you look at it in its totality, they can be signs of coming across to you about anxiety. And so I do just want to draw your attention to that. So this is a large question. Cathy and I have also had these discussions. Is anxiety the cause, or is it the effect? And it just really depends. What we can share with you is that those who are diagnosed with ADHD very much have a high percentage of also being diagnosed with anxiety, because ADHD has them miss certain things, both in information and processing, that causes a more anxious child. And so we really don't know. It could be different for each and other person and how the brain gets affected. But so we're just letting you know there's no answer to that other than it really just depends. And so as we think about the symptoms we just talked about, and we look at this diagram in front of you, you can see that there is things that are explicit to ADHD and anxiety, but also are interwoven with a lot of commonalities. And so it is really hard, as both a parent and also medical professionals and educators are having a hard time discerning between the two. And so they see the overlap, and that's the hard piece.
I know for our family, it's a lot about the irritability and intrusive thoughts, right? So I never know with my kiddo what what's going to happen. It's sort of he's consistently inconsistent, I like to say. I never know with his mood when he walks in that door if he's going to be happy, if he's going to be frustrated, and it has lasting impacts on us as for the rest of the day, and especially as somebody a working mom myself, where I come home and I'm tired, and I'm a little irritable, and then to deal with the unpredictability is a challenge. Is a challenge I face as a parent.
Mm-hmm. And so we titled this emotional roller coaster because it is. There are times where we're going to attend to anxiety. There's times we're attending to the ADHD. And it really is a comprehensive way of looking at it. And so when we think about this center column, we think about where we can address both based on these symptoms as well. And so part of the rationale of not being able to say, did one cause the other, is because they both affect the brain and its ability to do all the things that we as humans need to do, to think, to plan, to follow through with action. And both affect our executive functioning. And I would like to take a minute just to explain what that means. It affects, as we talked about, impulse control, right? The ability to be able to think before act. Same with emotional control, keeping feelings in check. So both the physical and emotional impulsivity is extremely hard. It also affects the ability to think flexibly. And what I mean by that is not very to beyond black and white. So a lot of time they only see things in black and white and can't see the gray in between. It's either one way or the other. Another aspect is working memory. You can have a conversation and 30 minutes later, it is not retained. It is a very frustrating thing as both a parent and an educator, but it does, both anxiety and ADHD do affect that, as well as their ability to monitor themselves and to plan and to organize and to prioritize. And then on top of that, following through with what I call task initiation. And I explain this because sometimes we're hard on others based on how this affects our students and our children. And so task initiation is something, and I use the example as your spouse is out of work. You've lined up all of these emails, attached resumes for them to apply to all these jobs. All they have to do is remove themselves from the living room to come into the room that you are, to be able to look at it and press the button, and they can't do it. And a lot of times we would deem that as lazy or you have no motivation. But the reality is the task and what it brings on is so overwhelming, it keeps them from starting in the first place. And so we have to break it down into smaller chunks. But it is something that you could be noticing, and I wanted to bring that to your attention. I also want to share that both ADHD and mental health both fall under this umbrella of neurodiversity. So anything that affects the brain in a neurological condition. What I love about this visual is the strengths that it shares for both a mental health perspective and an ADHD perspective. And I'm going to be very clear, the hyper focus of ADHD when it is on, some of our most brilliant work comes creatively and scientifically for those who have ADHD. And I would say the same thing from a mental health resilient piece with sensory awareness. They tend to know themselves a lot more and are in touch. And so I don't want us to look at these two diagnoses as being negative things for our kids. In a way, people can live with both anxiety and ADHD and have the right supports and to be highly functioning. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative thing. It's more along the lines of our expectations as parents have to change, and we have to let go of a little and change it to support the strengths that they currently have. And it might look very different than the way that you were raised. And I would say for me, before we move forward, the largest thing I had to do as a parent was to let go of the expectations of who I thought I was going to be as a parent. Because those are not the kids I was given. And so now I have to change who I am as a parent to fit the needs of who my children are. And that's not something we talk a lot about. And so give yourself grace and grieve in a way, letting go of the expectations of who you thought you were as a parent.
The other thing I just wanted to piggyback on that, which we've talked about, is that I may know a lot of things as a former elementary school teacher, but there is something about when it's your own kid right? That creates this other, like, sometimes I have no idea because it's my own kid. But if someone else were to call me, if Kara were to call me and say, I'm experiencing this, I'm sure I could give her a list of suggestions and strategies. And so it's so important to find your network of folk. And that's partially why we wanted to do this video series, of hearing that you're not alone, and that even though you think you know the things to do, that sometimes you don't know the things to do, and that's okay. And that there are other people out there who are brilliant people, like we all are, not just me and Kara, but the audience, right? That struggle with these things with our own kids.
Mm-hmm. And the thing about neurodiversity is every child is unique in how their brains are affected. And so neither one of our kids operate in the same place or space in the same way that your kid's not going to operate in the same way. And so that is also something to understand, is even if you have two neurodiverse kids, they're going to present very differently potentially, and that's okay too. And so when we think about this emotional roller coaster, regulating emotions is a huge piece of that. And I would like to share with you that it does start with us. We also have to regulate ourselves in order to be able to work with our own children. First and foremost, before we can do anything, is sleep. So I don't know what you might have as a structure or routine or what sleep might look like, but what we do know is that they are less irritable and are more willing to cope the more sleep they have. And that is true for us as adults as well, which also brings the structure routine in a sense. For those that have anxiety, knowing what's happening and what happens every day reduces the anxiety. For the ADHD component, learning how to organize comes off of having a structure and a routine also. And so this is one of the cases where the structure routine actually supports both the anxiety and also supports both the ADHD. And when structures and routine get thrown off for various fun reasons, that's okay too. They know that it's a flexible, you're teaching that flexibility piece, but then you're also going to come back to that structure and routine as well. Anything you want to add to structure and routine, Cathy?
No, but I
Okay.
just definitely know when we've strayed from our structure or routine, we see the consequences in our house.
Yes, yes, yes. Which brings to up this next one about consistent checking in. We don't know where students are at moments in time. And so we don't want them to sit, especially with the anxiety, internally and allowing them to process all these negative thoughts. And so a consistent check-in works. My hope started off of like, what was the high for the day? What was the low for the day? Because we don't typically get information about the day, nor can their brain go back to recall the whole thing and then have to sort through it. It's a very overwhelming aspect. And so we've moved to just thumbs up and thumbs down as a form of check-in. If it's a thumbs down, then I know I need to follow up a little bit more, and I might do that a little later. If it's a thumbs up, then I know I can operate as a parent and keep moving what I'm doing. But having that check-in is an important part of the structure routine. It also allows for these open lines of communication so that they also aren't internalizing what's happening for them. Another thing to think about is how all of our senses either inhibit or support ourselves. So when you think about senses, we think about smell, taste, touch, keep listening, and what else? There's 5 of them.
Yeah,
Seeing,
there you go.
seeing.
Routine.
Anyway, and thinking about your 5 senses, and I'll use myself for an example. If I smell black licorice, I can't function. Like, I'm not listening to what you're saying. Also, if I have to urinate, I can't. And if I have to go really badly, I cannot process any information you are sharing with me until that happens. And so it's also important for you to think about this as an adult, but also thinking about in your child, what is triggering them in a way that is making them more irritable or causing them to be overwhelmed? And are there other things that relax things? So for me, a coconut beach smell will automatically put me in a place and space of relaxation. Looking at water also does the exact same thing too. And so thinking about what you have access to in your house that allows them, that supports them or might be triggering them. And another example is, I thought it'd be great to have all these Yankee Candle wallflowers in the walls and have the house smell good, and it's fine until it gets to my son's bedroom. And then he wants no part of it. This is his space. That smell distracts him in different ways. He cannot sleep with it. And he's able to vocalize that. And so think about the things that you have in your house that are either going to support their sensory regulation or not support it. Because the next step in that is also how to co-regulate with them. And so what co-regulation means is, if your child is frustrated, and Kath is going to give you an example in a minute, frustrated and overwhelmed, you know, we are very quick to be humans, to be frustrated and overwhelmed, and we might not regulate ourselves and therefore not regulate. But what we share as Dr. Perry says this, is that a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a child, and a child needs regulation to kind of come back. And so we as adults have to, sometimes, I'm going to use the word bite our tongues as humans, and help them regulate first and have their physical response calm down before we can engage in them. I know Cathy has a story, so.
Yeah, in our house, we have a lot of big emotions, both my child and myself. I'll take my part of it too. And so often I will say to him, you know, you're not being punished, but you need to go upstairs and calm down. That will also let me calm down. And then when you're calm, we can then deal with this issue. So you're not being punished. It's a timeout, but not a punishment timeout. It's a go into your room, get yourself together in a space that's yours, and then you can come down, right? Like, you can be angry. You're not allowed to yell at me. You can be angry. You're not allowed to hit your little brother. You can be angry. You're not allowed to throw things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So go be angry. Go do that. And then when you've kind of gotten it out of your system, then we can start processing and talking about how we can solve the issue.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that you are helping in that process is you are increasing their emotional literacy by saying the actual emotion, and them recognizing what they're feeling inside simultaneously. And so we're regulating, we're giving them time to be able to do that, but we're also increasing their emotional literacy. Which brings us to brain breaks. The reason, and there are many different ways to have brain breaks. For some people, it could be a walk in nature. For others, it could be zoning out on an iPad or videos or video games. But what brain breaks do is they break legitimately from what people are focusing on and allow them to zone out. And so it's going to look very different for different people. One of the breaks we use in my family is we put up a YouTube video of find the odd man out emoji. And we do this purposely because it has everyone trained to hyper focus a little bit more. And then it becomes kind of a fun game. And then we can go back to what we were doing. I think brain breaks for Cathy works differently.
Yeah, and in our family, one of the suggestions that was also given for my kiddo is he needs to help disengage when he gets off the bus from school, right? So it's literally finding a space, and some days we're better about it than others, of like, we have a front room, it's called my video game room, and go to the video game room, and it's just natural light in there. We don't usually have a light on. Spend 10 minutes in there. I can read you a book, you can read a book, but just spend 10 minutes to like give your body and your brain a moment to kind of catch itself. And then we can go figure out the homework, the snacks, the whatever it is that you might need. But just take that minute and like pull yourself together just from your day, collect yourself, and move on from there.
Mm-hmm. And it could be something as simple as taking deep breaths, right? Like a way to bring the body and emotions also just down. Which leads us to our last emotional tools or toys. We know these as could be fidget spinners. For some, it could be a Rubik's Cube. For others, it could be a stuffed animal. There are many different ways and things that kids play with that make them feel better or allow them to distract in different ways and support. One of the things that both my children use in school is a foot swing because they are restless with their feet. And so it allows them to have movement while being able to focus on work. And so it could look very different. I think The hard part is exploring and investigating, both from a brain break, a sensory aspect, and an emotional tool perspective. They don't know what they don't know, what will work for them until we explore it. One of the things that does work the best out of all of the things in our household is we have a giant circle swing. And my son's form of regulation and emotional toy support is that swing. He listens to music, he zones out, and he needs the motion in order to regulate himself. And it took us a good 5 years before we recognized that that is what works best for him. And so I invite you to explore all the different things that are out there and to try them and to have your child be a part of that conversation, because we never know. It's never going to be the same for everyone else. Which brings us to communication. So as we've already shared, the communication is a two-way street from both us as a parent and from our child as well. And so in the same vein of neurologically, the brain processes input and output differently, it also does the same from a social emotional perspective. And it's not something that's innate specifically for those who are diagnosed with ADHD and the intersection of anxiety. And so what you see in front of you is a picture of autism in communication. And what I like about this visual is that there's one thing that's being asked of this individual, but there are all these thoughts that are happening on this side to get to that point. And that is very common in both ADHD and anxiety. And so I thought this is a great visual to share. As a result of that, and the processing time that it could take to process both language and emotions, we say to give space, right? And to also give grace and silence, especially from a sensory standpoint. And it's, in education, we might even call it wait time, but essentially we are waiting for them to be able to engage. And so we need to allow them to have the space, grace, and silence, similar to what Cathy was describing about coming off the bus and having that moment. But it's very important because if we try talking, they're not even in a place and space to receive it, both in a verbal and auditory standpoint. And so in our family, we say these words, space, grace, and silence all the time. And then to keep in mind that there are multiple ways in which we communicate. A lot of times there is what we say versus what's written versus a visual. And so what works best in how your child would like to receive communication from you? I think we have been conditioned in a way to think that a conversation is the best form of communication. And for my child, if I said to him, hey, can you go to the bathroom? No, I don't need to go, right? I would get a lot of pushback. If I show a picture of a toilet, he gets up and he leaves. And that, if we handwrite something and he reads it himself, he's more likely to comply and to go and to do something. And so I would also think about other ways rather than just your voice on how we communicate with them and what we're trying to communicate. Which leads me to share that repetition is something that is par for this emotional course, that just because we said something once or showed a visual once doesn't mean that it stays. We've just shared that working memory is a hard piece of this. And so we can't expect, just based off of one conversation or one way of communication, that they're ultimately going to get it. And we do want to talk about validating emotions and declarative language, but we have separate slides for that. So we're going to move on to that. I'm sure you've had this happen for you. You've been in a scenario and you can't move forward until you've talked about your emotions, right? And kids are no different. And so in any time of what I'll call turmoil around the emotional roller coaster that they are sharing with you, we do need to validate their emotions. So if there is a lot going on and they can't even tell you what's going on, just saying to them, you seem overwhelmed, like it means that, hey, you understand what is happening for me right now, and I can calm a little in order to engage with you. And so validating becomes a huge anxiety reliever and allows their brain to be able to focus on what you're saying.
And one of the things that we focus on in our house, again, and I said this before, is you're allowed to be this feeling, right? All of your emotions are valid. It's your actions based on that emotion that may not be valid. And
Mhm.
so you can be angry, you can't yell at mommy. You can be angry, you can't, break something, right? And so getting to be like, feeling what you're feeling is okay, but the interact, like the result and how you're channeling it, let's find another way that you can work out that emotion. Do you need to go do 10 jumping jacks? I see you have a lot of, I can see your muscles are really tight. Do you want me to rub your shoulders? I mean, those types of things that help them understand that what they're feeling is normal.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
that's such a critical thing, because I think that where it also plays into the anxiety is if like they feel like they're not allowed to feel something, right? Then
Mhm.
that can really create a situation where it just cycles, right? So I have more anxiety because I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling anxious, but I'm not allowed to feel that way. Well, you are allowed to feel that way. Like, let's
Mhm.
validate that and name it so they have the words for that.
Mhm. And nothing productive comes without them being regulated. And so, one way that they learn to regulate is by us validating their emotions. And if we don't, then they suppress it. They think something's more wrong with them, or they're going to act out in a different way because they don't know how to process the emotion. And so, that's where the validation becomes a huge part of that. Which leads us to declarative language. So, I imagine I've heard this a lot growing up. Go do this, go do that. And my child at one point said to us around 7 or 8 years old, like, I feel like all you do is tell me what to do, right? And he was sharing with us that he is more willing uh, to move forward with things if he was a part of the decision making in a way. And it was a clue for us to how are there other ways to communicate? And declarative language was what we found. And so you can see here the difference between get your shoes, wondering where your shoes are. And what happens internally is that they ask themselves the question, they then say, shoes, where are you? And they begin to problem solve for themselves, and they're starting to move through an internal process. When we say go get your shoes, they just see that as an order, not something that they need to problem solve. And so when we use declarative language, we are helping their brains process that internal regulation problem solving aspect. And so we've done this with the bath before, where I had a child refuse, any form of, I'll call hygiene. And so I said, you're really smelly and dirty. What do you think we could do about that? And they were like, smelly and dirty. I think I'll take a bath, and went right upstairs to go take a bath. And I'm like, that's all it took. So I know it seems very simple in the sense of just changing your language, but it really internally changes the dialogue that happens for them. Uh, have you tried any of this, Cathy?
No, but I keep thinking about ways that I might do that. Although I keep thinking about with my little one about saying, I noticed that your breath stinks. And then he would just literally breathe his stinky breath on me,
Mm-hmm.
just to show me that he stinks. Um, but I think that's more of a product of being four than anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that these are really great strategies. And again, you have to kind of put that into your brain of like, this is how I'm going to respond versus the way that we were always
Pop.
taught to, and what we experience as children.
Yeah, and I'm reading this one, give that to your dad. And so versus, I bet your dad would sure like to use that now, right? When we tell kids what to do, we are not always giving the description about the why. And it's really about the why that then allows them to learn. So giving it to my dad without giving a reason, right? Which is very different than I bet he would like to use that now. So what are you going to do to solve that problem, right? And so the action is happening internally from them, whereas they can't understand it from the command that's been given to them. And so you're right. We've been so trained or it's just an impulse for us to use what they call imperative language. And it is a huge mental shift for us. And so I would say it takes time and practice in order to get the response you're looking for. And before we leave you, one of the things we want to do in each of these videos as part of the series is to leave you with a self-care parent strategy, because it's not easy, as we've shared. It has its ups and downs, and it is an emotional roller coaster. So with that being said, I would ask that you create your own emotional safety plan and what that looks like. Because what it does is two things. It allows you to model how to regulate and what it is that you need in order to regulate. And when you have this plan in place, you can just do it instead of have to think about what you are going to do when you're feeling a moment of completely of feeling overwhelmed. And it will just be part of your process. And so I'm going to show you something similar. Mine is mommy needs 5 minutes. I'm going to go to my favorite chair in the bedroom. I'm going to take 10 breaths and I'm going to journal. And I can't say that I actually journal, but I do say it out loud. And I just sit there and reflect instead of reacting based on what was in front of me. And then I come back regulated. I hope they feel that energy. And then we're able to move on. And so I get to share with it when it's happening in real time. This is how I'm regulating, and I'm also modeling it. And then also coming back in a different place and space to engage in that conversation. And so this is just one strategy for you. And we've given a guide on the side for how to create your own emotional safety plan. Do you have one, Cathy?
Not as detailed as this. So since we've been planning this, I've been trying to think about what mine will exactly be. And for me, it's really, where is that space? I have to really think through, where is the space that I'm going to go to? I mean, the other pieces I got, but where would I really be able to calm down?
Yeah.
So that's one of my summer goals.
I vote the bathroom, but in case anyone went down, the door locks. Anyway. With that being said, here
So,
are go ahead, some key
oh,
takeaways.
sorry. I was gonna say, our key takeaways, right, is that a dysregulated adult cannot help regulate a child. So we need to have self-care strategies in place. So what are the things that bring you joy? How do you do them? And then how, in the moment when you're with your kid, do you regulate yourself so you can help regulate them or help them regulate themselves? We need to have patience and grace for all. So that is for your child, it's for your partners if you have them, it's for other children, and it's for yourself, right? Because I think it is very easy to beat yourself up and say, I should have handled that differently. And so actually, those are some of the conversations I'll actually have with my kid. Hey, dude, like mommy lost her mind. Mommy, mommy was stressed out about something at work. And when you started doing blank, it really just, I lost control and I really shouldn't have yelled at you. I'm sorry, right? So it's giving it to myself, but also modeling that to my kid, that we are all imperfect. We need to think about these different purposeful and varied ways to communicate, right? Because it's about giving kids access, but also modeling for them, because that declarative language really helps, as Kara said, to promote those internal processes.
Yeah.
So we really hope you took a lot from these videos and this video, and there will be other videos to come. You can stay connected with the LRC through this lovely QR code. The next slide shows our brief, some references for you to look at, and our image sources. And again, we really hope that you stay connected with our LRC-South out of Rowan University. We have a lot of great programming here for teachers and parents and everyone. And we're just appreciative of you spending your time with us, and hope you get some self-care in today.